Heartland Flags and Gifts presents Legends and Listeners with Scott Dochterman and Chad Leistikow. Fly 'em high and fly 'em proud. Find your flag at heartlandflags.com. Breaking down the Big Ten from the Channel Seed Studios, this is Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. Welcome to episode 28 of Legends and Listeners here on the Iowa Everywhere Network. We are coming to you from the Channel Seed Studios, as always, today. The voice you are hearing is that of Chad Leistikow. I'm a sports columnist for the Des Moines Register. The voice you're about to hear is that of Scott Dochterman of The Athletic. Scott, a week ago, Caitlin Clark set the NCAA Division I women's scoring record with a career-high 49-point performance. The Iowa women have not been back in action since, but we will preview tonight's big matchup at Indiana later in the show. But first, Scott, here come the Fighting McCaffreys. Fran and the boys are back to 500 in Big Ten play after their two best wins of the season, including Tuesday night's 78-71 win at Michigan State. Business is booming for the Hawkeyes again.
It's amazing how everything has changed, Chad, in the last 5 or so days, and it's not just because the record and winning 2 games in a row for the men. It's because the feelings, you could tell that the feelings about this program have just flipped from people. Like the frustration of the constant win one, lose one, win one, lose one, to now win 2 games against quad 1 competition. And anytime you go to Michigan State to win, that's a big deal. Because I've seen way too many clubbings over there over the years. And so for them to play the way they did, even if this isn't the best Michigan State team that Tom Izzo's had, but for them to go over there and dictate tempo for the last 30 minutes, to weather all the runs, to hit your free throws, to shoot 57% in the first half, to me, this is a team that's gelling and playing more connected at the right time of year.
So I'll always remember the 2015-16 men's basketball season for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
One of them was because my esteemed colleague, Rick Brown, retired after the Big Ten championship football game, didn't get to cover the Rose Bowl. But anyway, because we hadn't hired anyone, I had the men's basketball beat completely to myself. Not that I didn't want that, but that means everything, on top of football. So it was a super busy winter. And I remember sharing that winter with you. And I'm pretty sure we were both in the Breslin Center in 2016 when the Hawkeyes did it. So like I said, my memories are pretty good of and rare of going to Breslin Center. And I'm glad you were there with me and seeing them pull out a win, because I think that was the year before you went to Land of 10. So our journeys have all changed from there. But yeah, it's special to win there. I mean, it's hard to do.
They had so many great teams, and they have under Tom Izzo, and so many times before that game, I'd go there and I'm like, okay, this one's not going to be close. And it wasn't. And I've seen 40-point losses, and the chair slam happened right in front of me 2012, I think it was. And then that game, as you referenced, in 2016, that was when they swept Michigan State, when both times Michigan State was in the top 5, and Iowa looked really good that night. And I thought, and then they were on their way to a 10-1 start and a 12-6 finish, and a second round bow out. But that said, Iowa has gotten the best out of Michigan State. They've won 5 out of the last 6, and the only one they lost was over there last year when they had a chance to win in the last, possession of the game. So Iowa, for all the problems that it had over the years, where it felt like it was not only the little brother, but it was like smacked around little brother to Michigan State, now is I won't say reversed course, but has been able to win these games. And yesterday's was huge, or 2 days ago's was huge, for a couple of reasons. One, it got them up to 500 again in the Big Ten, and going down at this point in the season, you need to be there. But also, boosted them up 5 points in the net, and they're still, really pretty far off the net, as far as getting into the NCAA tournament, but it's a major step with 4 games left and then the Big Ten tournament. So they're moving in the right direction, and they're playing their best basketball, most importantly, this time of year.
Before we get going too much further, I want to make sure to shout out our primary sponsor on the hood of our Legends and Listeners car, Heartland Flags and Gifts, which can produce nearly every sport, every team, and every flag for you. If you want a flag to proudly wave for Daytona 500 winner William Byron, you can. Knoxville Nationals or NASCAR legend Kyle Larson, they got that. NASCAR, NFL, college football, basketball, Hawkeyes, Cyclones, Panthers, Bulldogs, and they offer free shipping anywhere in the U.S. Visit our good friends online at heartlandflags.com or in store at 3719 Southwest 9th Street in Des Moines. We thank them for being with us. I loved watching the game from home. Tyler Tashman, his first game ever at the Breslin Center, got to cover a win because it was just it was like you said, it was like their best performance of the season. It was their best win of the season. Owen Freeman plays 8 minutes, and Patrick McCaffrey stepped into the big first half. Ben Krikke, who hadn't had more than 5 rebounds in a game in I think close to 10 games, gets 14 rebounds. And then Peyton Sanford, the guy who missed 2 last-second shots last year, scores 22 points. And delivers, throughout that game. His brother even has a 3-pointer that was kind of big in that game. And so, kudos to, this team and Fran McCaffrey. I know a lot of people like to dog on him about March, but as I pointed out on Twitter, he has been really good in February, the last 6 seasons. They've won 34 of their last 48 February games. That's a pretty incredible stat. 32-14 over the last 6 years. They won 2 the prior year, that awful 2018 year, in which their season ended March 1st. So that counted to the March record. But, but I feel like you got to give Fran a lot of credit here because he does, as I wrote in my column after the game, he does annually get this team in position to do something. And I know he hasn't gotten to the Sweet 16, totally valid criticism. But he got Iowa at least in the fight, and it's February 22nd, something like that today. And February 22nd, and here they are.
To see this team compete was something that we all wanted to see back in December. I mean, they weren't very connected. We know that. They were 0-3 to start the Big Ten season. They lost to Michigan, which is the worst team by far in the Big Ten. They looked like they were lost. And they weren't real competitive in a lot of those games that they lost to major competition. Then they came on strong at the beginning of the calendar year and won 3 straight in the Big Ten. And then it's kind of been one step forward, one step back, pretty much the whole season. Now that they're getting to this point, you can see this team gelling. And I think, part of it is they've got their rotations set. And they've limited the bench a little bit. Brock Harding is your number 2 point guard over Dasonte Bowen. He was trying to kind of go back and forth there. I like Patrick McCaffrey off the bench because I think he plays a better role when he is just instant energy, athletic ability, and scoring potential.
Offense, he's instant offense off the bench, and you need that.
You're right. And I like Josh Dix off the front because he's the best on-ball defender that they have. And you could see the confidence growing with him. And then, of course, Owen Freeman, he had 8 points in 8 minutes the other day. I mean, he's the best freshman in the Big Ten, one of the best in the country. And yet they were able to overcome that. And I thought that was really impressive. So there are a lot of valid criticisms of Fran McCaffrey. But I think, as you pointed out, I think we're looking since 2012. Only Iowa and Michigan State have one losing season in the Big Ten since then. The rest of them have been, 500 seasons or north of 500. And this team is in position to make that happen again. And that's something I never thought I would see back in January. That's for sure.
Yeah. Another thing I pointed out in my column was, they've been an upper half Big Ten finisher 10 of the last 11 years. They're now currently tied for 7th in win percentage in the Big Ten at 8-8, and certainly some work to do. We're going to get to that, but they're there. They're in that upper half conversation again. And the only other team that has 10 is Michigan State. Even Wisconsin doesn't have 10 in the last 11 years. So pretty you don't have a first in there. You do have a Big Ten tournament title, but you don't, but you've been there 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I just like how the team's playing. I like how they've come together. It reminds me of last year when they really kind of came together in February. They only beat Michigan State in that rally, and then they went over to Indiana and dominated in that road game over there. It kind of reminded me of that a little bit. I don't know. And then on the Fran McCaffrey topic, Scott, he was quoted recently. I can't remember where. Where was it? He said he's not going to – maybe it was a teleconference or something.
It was a teleconference this week. It was Monday. Yeah.
Monday. Okay. What did he say? He said, I'm not retiring anytime soon or something
He said something about Tom Izzo isn't retiring anytime soon, and neither am I.
Okay.
And so, that's – you could parse that as does that mean in general or in Iowa, whatever. I'm taking him at his word and I'm going to mean it. He's got a job here, so it means Iowa. Now that could change. Anything can change, of course, but retirement is permanent, and I don't see him doing that. And the way that this team has come together, and we knew this was going to be a challenging year, Chad. I mean, this is a team that's lost a lot of pieces. I mean, Connor McCaffrey was the glue piece for such a long period of time, and Chris Murray was a first-round draft pick, and this team was competing in a different way last year. And I think now they figured out their rotation. They figured out how to play. And I think these last two games, I mean, their two best wins by far, to fight the way they did against Wisconsin, because they played horrifically early on in that game, defensively especially, and yet to completely fight back, get in overtime, and then win was really impressive. And then to top it off, to go into the Breslin Center and winning a game that nobody really expected him to win. I think it proves a point that Fran is a good coach. Anybody who says differently doesn't know the sport. And then secondly, that they're all playing for each other. And there were various times, Chad, where they lose a couple of games and you're just like, I don't know, man. I don't know if this team's got it. And yet they keep coming back. And that's a good mark for the team. And it's a great mark for the head coach.
For sure. And, Peyton Sanford and Tony Perkins, probably the two, well, Patrick McCaffrey as well. But in terms of just sort of that positive, we've heard the most from Peyton and Tony this season. They've continually remained, hey, this team's close. This team's tight. We're going to get through this. And they really haven't fallen into a big losing streak. Yeah, they started 0-3 in Big Ten play. Those were three tough Big Ten games. I mean, the one against Michigan was kind of the one you'd say is, you'd love to have back. But, the other two are Wisconsin and Purdue. So, but let's, I don't know, just big picture talk here, Scott. I mean, is this, you've got, this was supposed to be a rebuilding year, right? I mean, even though you've got veterans, you lose Luka Garza, you lose Keegan Murray, you lose Chris Murray in back-to-back years. I mean, prominent national players, prominent NBA players or draft players anyway.
Yeah.
And, we didn't know who their leading scorer was going to be this year. It's still not, settled. That still hasn't been figured out, Perkins or Cricky or Sanford. So this was supposed to be a rebuilding year. And then yet I see pushback on Twitter. Wow, they've got all these veterans. But it was a rebuilding year. And, they're playing a ton of true freshmen too. So I feel like I'm on the right ground in saying this was supposed to be a rebuilding year, right?
It is a rebuilding year, and you have to see it as such. You brought up there, and then you throw on a Connor McCaffrey and a Jordan Bohannon and a Joe Wieskamp and some players that were glue players that were also really prominent. And this team, it needed to fill that vacuum, not only in scoring, but in toughness and learning how to play at a high level. And I would say, the first month and a half to 2 months was really a struggle for this team to really play at a decent level. But they're coming together nicely, because when you have a freshman center, that's not easy. And you're playing them 30 minutes a game, except for against Michigan State. And then you got somebody like Dix, didn't play a whole lot last year. And now Sanford was more of a bench player. Perkins was more of a role player. Cricky wasn't even here. So you've got guys having major roles in different areas. Patrick McCaffrey has missed a lot of time in his career. So now they're all kind of coming together and trying to figure it out. And it's got to be organic. You can't force it, because then it never works. So at this point, you look at it, and I know objectively going into the year, I thought at best they'll be a bubble team, probably an NIT team. And I think you look at it objectively, and that's probably how you sit. And then by the end of December, I'm like, I don't think they're going to play in the postseason. But they've come back and they've played well together. They're connected, and that they've still got a 4-game stretch that's going to be pretty challenging for them. And then the tournament's not going to be easy either. But to say this on February 22nd, that there's hope, hope for the postseason, hope for the NCAA tournament is something that I think is impressive at this point.
So you got your bracketology degree here, Scott. You ready to get into some logistics?
I did put that somewhat together the other day.
Okay, let's hear from you. I'm going to tip to you, the our resident Iowa Everywhere bracketologist, Scott Dochterman, ladies and gentlemen. The floor is yours.
Okay, well, I have not
Scotty
updated
Brackets.
it since Scotty Brackets. Yeah, that's me. I'm right up there with Joey Brackets there. But the other day, I just tried to figure out, okay, now how many one-bid teams and how many in the leagues, and versus what the layout will be among the major conferences, and kind of where Iowa sat in that. And I kind of had them at like the 82nd team, and this was before the win against Michigan State. And it's because I think there are like 24 or 26 teams with leagues with 1 or 2 bids. And then you've got your kind of power conference teams, and Iowa's still back. I would say Iowa moved up 3 or 4 spots, moved up 5 in the net the other day. It's still got a long way to go because the Big 12, the teams win and lose, and it doesn't really matter. They don't change their net. Iowa is still 2-7 against quad 1 competition. That's not exactly one that's going to get you into the bubble discussion. However, moving up 5 spots after a win against a quality team, and then you still have 3 quad 1 opponents left, 2 of which are on the road, you have an opportunity. And if they can somehow pull together, say, a 3-1 finish and go to the Big Ten tournament and get to Friday at the minimum, then they've put themselves in that discussion. It may be heartbreak and it may be Dayton, but they put themselves in that discussion. And but they've got a lot of work to do, and they've got some tough competition to compete against.
I do have to correct you. They're now at 3-7 in quad 1 because Minnesota, without playing last night, moved from 76 to 73 in the net. So that gives Iowa another quad 1 win, a road win from earlier this year up in Minneapolis. Also gives them a quad 2 win because they beat Minnesota at home in that top 75. So, it's semantics, but yeah, I know, but it's Iowa now 3-7 in quad 1, 5-3 in quad 2. So that's 8-10 in quads 1 and 2. So, at least it puts them in the conversation. Like you said, I just ran kind of the bracket forecast for the Big Ten tournament. If Iowa goes 2-2 to finish 10-10 in the Big Ten and all of their expected results happen, we know that's not going to happen. But Iowa would be the number 7 seed in the conference at 10-10. And then even if they go 11-9 under that scenario, they would be the 7 seed. So let's say lose at Illinois on Saturday, then win out at Northwestern, or home against Penn State, at Northwestern, home against Illinois. A lot to ask, yes, but that's kind of what we're talking about getting in. They would still be the 7 seed in the Big Ten tournament, which gives them, you're going to be in the Thursday game probably either way.
Yeah.
At this point, but you almost, Scott, kind of need to have a pretty decent quality opponent in that first game, like a 7-10 type game. In this scenario, that 10 would be Ohio State. That's a beatable team. That is a team that has a net, let's see where it is.
66.
66. So you're talking quad 2. I guess that's okay. But you got to win that game. And then after that, pretty much everything is going to be quad 1 after that, because top 50 neutral, gives you those opportunities. So, if 3-1, again, that's pretty optimistic, but 3-1 gets you to 19-12, win 2 games in the Big Ten tournament, win 1 game in the Big Ten tournament, you're at 20 wins. I mean, at least you're in the conversation maybe for Dayton. And at minimum then at that point, Scott, you're in the NIT. I know people don't want to go to the NIT, but with these young players and all this stuff, like NIT might not be the worst thing in the world for this team.
The NIT's had it's been interesting experiences, over the years, but really in the Fran era, people have accepted it and well. I mean, I think some of their best crowds have been NIT crowds because it just changes the environment of the, what's going on in there. Now, I don't know how that will work as far as NIT hosting with women's tournament going on concurrently. I don't know the schedule if that'll allow, but even so, that that's still too far out there. I mean, I think you want to still eye the NCAA as long as you can, and I think with this team, if they can get to that point, it's it's a win for the program, because you can't just expect Iowa to compete every single year and get in the NCAA tournament. I mean, I think 4 out of a 5-year period is outstanding. That's something that Lute and Tom Davis didn't do with regularity. I mean, 4 out of 5, and I think this is something that you based on the team you have, I think it's a strong step. You only took a slight step back. You didn't go all the way into a losing season or non-tournament competition. So, will the fans reward that like they have in the past? I don't know. But I think if they, this reminds me a lot of that year where they had a really strong surge. Bohannon hit that shot at Wisconsin with his brothers in attendance, and that became a big thing. And then they got to the Big Ten tournament. It was like, beat Indiana, you get in the tournament. They lost, and then they went to the NIT. But there were 2 games that year in the NIT, and they did really well as far as fan attendance goes. So I could see that being a scenario.
Yeah, we're not advocating for like, hey, NIT, big success season, but wouldn't be. I don't think it'd be like the worst consolation prize for this team, which is looked like it could be kind of dire at certain points of the year. So, yeah. Anything else you want to talk about on the men's hoop side, Scott, before we transition?
You know what? No, but I do have something that I do want to talk about, and that is for Mother's Day coming up. Mother's Day in Des Moines with Barry Manilow. The Iowa Everywhere, one grand prize winner receives a round-trip airfare and hotel. 4 lucky winners receive a pair of tickets. Tell us why you'd like to connect with your mother at Manilow's August 1st show, and then email win@iowaeverywhere.com. So Barry Manilow. Chad, have you ever seen him in concert?
I cannot say I have, but it sounds like a great situation for a lot of people out there.
Yeah. I'm sure that it'll be well attended, and we welcome to see your emails, and and maybe you'll get a chance to sing Copacabana live with Barry Manilow, and that's something a lot of people in the 70s and 80s would have loved to do.
Well, I appreciate that, Scott, and I don't know about you, but it does feel like grilling weather again, and what better time to put some flat iron steaks on the grill, pour a glass of Steeple Ridge bourbon, another sponsor of Legends and Listeners. Steeple Ridge delivers a high-quality, delicious drinking bourbon. If you don't find Steeple Ridge at your favorite retailer or grocer, ask for it by name. Steeple Ridge is distilled, aged, and bottled in Iowa by Lonely Oak Distillery. Let's move on to the women, Scott. Caitlin Clark, now 3,569 points. We were both there last Thursday night. I know you had your athletic colleague there as well. It was a packed house media-wise. I think they said it was like the most media credentials in history for was it Iowa women's basketball or Big Ten women's basketball or something, right? It was like,
yeah, and I don't know specifics, but yeah, it was pretty heavy. That's for sure. We haven't seen that before.
Yeah, but so we've all kind of written our glowing pieces about the moment, about the atmosphere. Anything you want to talk about there before we kind of move on to writing, talking about the whole team and what happens tonight, starting with Indiana?
It's a week ago, so it's in some ways to revisit it. Everybody else has already kind of lived in that. I think everybody's ready to move on. But, I think when we look back at the career of Caitlin Clark, whether it ends in, a month and a half, or we got it 13 months with her, I think that moment lives on. to hit a 3-pointer, but to make it a logo 3, the way she did it, as early as she did it, and then 23 points in the first quarter and 49 for, an Iowa record. She's Teflon to pressure, man. All eyes, as you said, there was the most, in the Big Ten or Iowa history, there were the most credentialed media there. The crowd was at a fever pitch an hour before tip-off. Everybody was just dying for that shot. And she didn't go 3 for 14 and barely get it. She drilled it in the first couple of minutes of the game. And then to just continuously score at that pace. And she's not a post player. She's shooting for, 3-pointers. That's, it's a lower percentage shot. I'm continuously blown away by what she does and how she does it and how she performs and how she reacts. To me, I think it's one of the greatest moments I've ever seen in sports history. And I don't think there was a better moment inside Carver Hawkeye Arena, at least competitively.
Yeah, well put. When you see moments like that, it's just like you think to yourself, like, it just feels right for her to go to the WNBA next. I know everyone wants to know that, and she doesn't have a decision or whatever, but it's just all that it feels like, she said at the beginning of the year, like, I want to let the season play out and, my gut feel, whatever, will kind of determine it all. And it just feels like everything that has happened just sort of, it's the perfect transition, honestly, to go to the next level, and which would start in May in Indiana, in a Midwest city, as someone put it to me, like, basically like a bigger Des Moines. It's like perfect for her. It seems like, and and the Caitlin Clark story would instantly continue, like in May, rather than, going into another college off season, trying to acclimate to a bunch of new freshmen, because, I'm coming to grips with the fact that it's senior day next week, and Gabby Marshall, Kate Martin, and Molly Davis are all going to be gone after this season. I mean, they cannot come back. So, it just feels like it feels like it couldn't have happened more perfectly, honestly. If she is, to have the video tributes and all this stuff, it's like, it's almost like you can't have that stuff and then come back, like it would feel really weird and all this stuff. You're setting the records. I don't know. So it's just, that's kind of some of the stuff that was going through my head, was like, this is like perfect. Like it couldn't have been more perfect. And the story, it could not be written more perfectly in terms of her career, her stardom, all this stuff. And it just feels like she's ready for that next step at some point. But before we get to that, how high can she take the Hawkeyes, Scott? After this game the other night, like, I feel different almost about this team. Like I feel like she can, and maybe I felt this way before, but like, I legitimately think she can just put her team on her back if she needs to, and just will this team to whatever it needs to do. If she can just shoot like that, which she can.
Yeah, right. She can, for sure. Well, you said a lot there. I do think the trajectory is right, first of all, for this to be the conclusion. Competitively, she has no peer at this level. She needs to go compete against the best in the world, and that's what she would do at the next level. And I think, the one thing I'll say is the WNBA needs to prepare itself for her, because it's going to come to the mainstream, and they're going to have the Caitlin Clark effect in Indiana. And then when she goes on the road and competes at all these other different spots, because people are going to want to see her, they got to be prepared for that. And they've got to be prepared to give her a culture that allows her to succeed, and then allows everybody else to succeed too. Because, whether it's the backbiting and negative comments, of course, there's been apologies and conversations in the moments since then that have kind of let that dissipate, but they've got to put themselves in that position, because, as well as the W is a much higher level of competition, her platform is much higher at the University of Iowa, because of college basketball, and she is the face of college basketball. And so they need to cultivate an environment that allows her to grow and her star to shine even brighter. And then it allows everybody else's star to shine too. As far as this year goes, yes, absolutely. She's got a chance to take the Iowa to the promised land again. because she is the best competitor on the floor. She's the best player on the floor, and everybody's scared of her when she's good, because it's like, oh no, here she goes. And that causes all kinds of pressure. And that's why Iowa's field goal defense has been better this year, is because when they are running and they have the tempo that they want and they're hitting shots in transition, nobody can defend them. And then the other team quick shoots the ball because they feel like the only way they can catch up is with a three. And maybe they're open, but then they miss. And then it's back to the same thing. And that's why we've seen a lot of 6-point games turn into 16-point games very quickly for this team. And I think she's more than capable of doing that. Now, there's going to be some styles of play, matchups that aren't going to work for them, and they have to work through that. And I think the 2 losses in Big Ten play showed that. When you're at Ohio State and you're up 18, or you're at Nebraska and you're up in double figures in the fourth quarter, you've got to figure out how to close it out. And a lot of times that's not hitting those shots. A lot of times it's milking clock and still getting good shots. Iowa needs to kind of lean into that and figure it out. And that's a coaching thing as much as it is a player-driven thing. But that said, I don't see it, there's a couple teams I think that are better on paper than Iowa, but I don't see a team that Iowa can't beat if it plays its best game.
Right. And there's a lot to play for. They're currently the number 5 overall seed, according to the women's, tournament committees, whoever does that stuff. And so they've, they could get that number 1 seed. Iowa hasn't been a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament since the 80s. That would be significant. I know they wanted to get the 1 seed last year. They fell 1 spot short of that. I don't think it matters as much as long as you're not the number 8 overall seed, probably. That would probably be what I would say, is as long as you're the number 7 overall seed or higher, I feel like the path is going to be pretty similar in the NCAA tournament. But can they get to that point? They can't stub their toe too much. Tonight at Indiana is going to be the most hostile environment that they see the rest of the year, because the Big Ten tournament is going to be friendly up in Minneapolis, at Minnesota. At Minnesota next week isn't going to be the same as at Indiana tonight. So that's it. And then, maybe in the NCAA tournament, possibly, maybe they would face a 50-50 type environment at worst, but they've got a lot of advantages on their side, but they got to win some games. And both these games this week are kind of tough.
Yeah, they've got a challenging schedule. I mean, 3 out of the last 4 games, I think, I watched Illinois and Indiana the other day, and Illinois played really well, and Indiana played its worst game of the year. And you saw a blowout loss for the Hoosiers, which means that their season can go 2 different directions. And tonight is kind of that crossroads point. I mean, when you look at Indiana, they played poorly in Iowa City. They played poorly at Champaign. They're coming back, and they know who they're playing. They know that the game is sold out. They can understand the stakes here are really high. They're probably out of the Big Ten title race, but they want to play well, and they want to beat Caitlin Clark like they did last year there. And so you're going to get a really passionate, strong effort, and it is a road environment. And it's a, Iowa and Indiana entered the Big Ten on the exact same day in 1889. So, they've been competing against each other now for 135 years, or I guess 120.
That's some good Scott Dochterman history. Wouldn't get that fact from anyone else. But
yeah, thank you. But I also think that Iowa has an opportunity here, because Iowa's had a week off, and I think that was such an important part of this, because the trajectory of the season was at a right period for them to get that mental break. They've had to play, as Lisa said, a national championship game, every single game, or NCAA tournament game, every single game, because of these environments. And you had the pressure of the Caitlin Clark, scoring watch, and you had all this media attention, that they've had a weekend off to go to do homework, maybe go see their parents, maybe hang out with their friends, maybe do nothing, but just get a chance to kind of relax and not talk to us and not do everything. Now they go to an environment where they understand the opponent that they're facing. They know it's a rival. They know that they're good. And if Iowa can get out to a big lead, that's when a team like Indiana may just go, that Indiana's trying to fight back. and then they can't. And then, we've seen it unfortunately with the men's team before, that when they play really well, and then sometimes the wheels come off and they just can't get it back. And I could see that with Indiana, but Iowa just has to make sure that it does the punching first. And if Iowa can get out to a 14-6 lead in the first quarter and Indiana is struggling, keep your foot on the gas. Don't let them, don't give them a chance, and then you may have a runaway win.
Yeah, the little bit of intel that I've heard is I feel like the matchup favors Iowa more tonight, but the Illinois matchup is not fit as much for them. We'll see if that plays out. Illinois beat the Hawkeyes last year in Champaign. Mm-hmm. So on the flip side of what I just said, a lot of motivation here for Indiana because they're coming off the loss. They got beat down in Iowa City in that, Gus Johnson game back in January. Iowa beat them on their home court last year at the buzzer with Caitlin Clark. Iowa won the Big Ten tournament last year. So there's a lot of payback potentially and then on the flip side, Iowa's got a little payback for Illinois because Illinois beat them in the only meeting last year. And that was one of those games that sort of shaped the way the rest of Iowa's season went, because Iowa lost that game. Then they went on the road. I can't remember if it was the very next game, but shortly thereafter they went on the road to Michigan, which was good at the time, blew them out, and then all of a sudden their season was on a different trajectory. So motivation is always part of it too. So, but I'm excited. I'm excited to start as a journalist or as a writer. We actually do write more than talk for a living, but write about some of these other players now. We've been writing about Caitlin Clark for weeks here because of the record pursuit, all this stuff. I wrote about the Pistol Pete stuff. I know the Athletic did as well. Yeah, that's coming. But there's so many storylines in this team that are going to factor into how far this team goes. So I'm excited to just kind of dig into, how is Lisa doing the rotations now? Is Kate Martin going to keep it going? Can Gabby Marshall get hot? Molly Davis now back from illness. How much of a factor can she be? Can Hannah Stolke be the, maybe not a 47-point scorer every night, but can she be a 20-point scorer like Sonato was last year and really be that reliable inside presence? There's so many storylines yet to be written about this Hawkeye women's team beyond Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, and that's been the unfortunate part, because I think what we've seen, Chad, is when you go to Carver Hawkeye Arena, okay, the overwhelming majority of shirts are for Caitlin Clark, but there is a sizable amount for Molly Davis and Kate Martin and Hannah Stolke shirts. I mean, fans have their favorite players that they like just as much. And yes, Caitlin Clark is the Michael Jordan here, but everybody's got a favorite. I've heard a lot. I love Molly Davis. She's scrappy. She's, just the things with all of the players. But I think that's something that now it's about Iowa basketball. Now it's about how do they win these games. Now how do these players compete in these important games? And that is what's the difference between a week ago and now. A week ago, it's when's Caitlin going to set the record? It's not really about wins and losses. Now it's all about taking them to the promised land. How do they compete to win the Big Ten championship, to win the Big Ten tournament, to win the NCAA tournament, and get in there and compete against these teams? And what does it take? And I think that's healthy. I know I asked Caitlin about that last week after the game, and she's about finally can we talk about Iowa basketball? She goes, I'd love that, and I think that's probably been something that's been a burden to some extent. Now she's handled the pressure better than any person I've ever seen in my life, and at any level. But the pressure of she's also a very good teammate, and she's a good person, and I think that she would love to have that same type of stuff shine on her friends and teammates, as opposed to just constantly the attention being on her.
Yeah, I'm here for it. And I ended up writing about more of her, the person, when she broke the record too, and just how that was equally part of that night. Just that she had been a good teammate through all this, and they were happy for her. It's not there's a genuine, I should say, love for what she's done for this team, and she loves her teammates back. So yeah, she really is a pretty amazing person, an amazing teammate, an amazing player. I know we want to talk a little football, Scott. Are you ready to move into pre-combine. You're going to the NFL scouting combine on Sunday, man. Yeah, I know. I admire like all the NFL draft stuff you know about and all the stuff you do for the Athletic. It is really impressive, and they are really. I will say this as somebody who talks to you a lot about the NFL. Like, they are lucky to have you when it comes to the draft coverage. What are you looking at? What are you looking at the combine, and what kind of Hawkeye angle can you bring to this discussion here?
There are so many angles beyond the Hawkeyes. I mean, the Hawkeyes are pretty narrow. I mean, like Cooper DeJean won't work out. We know Eric All won't. Then there's two other Hawkeyes, and Torrey Taylor really doesn't need to. I mean, they're not going to. The 40 time isn't going to determine whether somebody drafts him as to be their punter. And Logan Lee is. A guy that I think is hoping to catch somebody's, attention and maybe put himself into that discussion. And so he's going to have to do some of that. But, so with Cooper, he's going to be the focus, obviously. And it's not only about a recovery because he has been working out and he's fine, out in California, but I think it's going to be about, why did you leave? The difficulties and challenges of leaving. That's the provincial angle. And then I think beyond that, it's, what can he do? What's his position at the next level? So I think he's somewhat positionless. Came to Iowa as a safety, then he became the cash, then he became a corner. He could play all three. And is it going to be more of a matter of, hey, we'll just put him where he needs to go and he'll play. And
wide receiver.
If that happens, Chad, oh boy, what if he's like the Taysom Hill or something of the NFL?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't even want to go there, but
no, he'll be a great return man though. That's such
an
an advantage of him, is you could draft him as a safety or cash or whatever, and he can be your punt returner and kick returner. I mean, you don't kick return much in the NFL anymore, but punt returner, man, that would be a huge weapon, and I think that would vault my valuation of him as an NFL team into that first round.
He's right now kind of in the high, in the 20s, like 21, 22 evaluation wise, but that all changes when we get pro days and we get the combine and everything like that. But for a team like, say, the Minnesota Vikings, they have some needs in that part of their secondary. It's semi-positionless, which is fine. He can adapt to any position. And then they were like 23rd in punt return average. If you bring him in and he plays as a rookie, 75% of your snaps on defense as a fifth defensive back, or maybe works his way there, and then also returns punts for you, that's a huge asset. And I think that's what people are going to be looking at for him. Broadly, there's a lot of different storylines there. I mean, out of the 14 quarterbacks, 11 were transfers. That's pretty amazing, and then you look at all of the guys that had opportunities to return. Cooper's one of them, but he's a first rounder, so it doesn't really count. But what about the third and fourth round types? And you had the opportunity to transfer, maybe to go up from an FCS program to an FBS program. What made you go to the draft versus what made you stay? And instead of trying to get an NIL deal and go to another college or something like that. I think there's just, and then you got, provincially, few people might be able to talk about Tim Lester, and then, or Caden Proctor. And then there's also the thought of, all the Alabama players talking about Nick Saban leaving, or Jim Harbaugh leaving, or Kalen DeBoer leaving, Jed Fish, so there's all these lines, and it's not even talking about the actual draft and how they play. And then there's always something weird that happens, somebody got arrested for something, and that comes out at the draft or at the combine. So between that, and then of course some of the news about the changing face of the college football playoff.
That's what I wanted to bring up next. Like, are we really going to 14 teams already? Like, that sounds. I just want to see how 12 plays out for a while.
Yeah,
that's my feeling.
So you think it should be 12?
Well, I just want to see it play out. Like let's not just jump to 14.
I think this is this is a Big Ten push right now.
Well, it probably helps Iowa to expand to 14, right?
Yeah. Well, 14. To me, they'll talk 14 and it'll be 16. I mean, you just can't get around that. I mean, 14, come on, that's a weird. It's like the Big Ten being
the
14.
NFL is 14.
I know, and I'm surprised it isn't 16. But I think what's going to happen is teams are going to see these home games and they have buys, and they're like, why can't we get a home game? And then I think that'll change everything. The push is from the SEC and Big Ten is to get automatic qualifiers from their conference, and they're maybe right on that, which is, the Big Ten has 18 teams, the SEC has 16 teams. The third best team from each of those leagues is better than the number 2 team from another league, and certainly not, if you have a 10-2, let's say Iowa, not, let's say a year where they're 10-2, they lost at Ohio State by a touchdown, they lost at home close to Penn State. We'll just throw that out there, but they're 10-2, and they've beaten 3 or 4 other really good teams that are ranked, and yet, do they deserve a spot if they're the number 3 team in the Big Ten or even 4 team in the Big Ten over the Mountain West team that's maybe 11-1? Maybe that you got your automatic qualifiers like Sun Belt teams 12-0, but the 11-1 Mountain West team that played one Power 5 team, maybe it was Oregon State or Washington State or something like that. That's a lot of the crux to the discussion. And we're talking about Iowa, but the SEC is the same way. So there's a push for maybe the SEC or Big Ten to say we get 3 or 4 automatic qualifiers in the tournament, and maybe the other 2 Power 5 leagues get at least 2, and then that's why it might expand to 14 or 16 just to make sure that these teams, and then what does it do to the championship game? Does it make it irrelevant? Do you even play it anymore?
Yeah, conference champion? I know. Seriously.
I wouldn't even play it. I'd make that your first round weekend. But
yeah. I mean, you could have guys sitting out that game. I mean, I realize, I don't know. It's just going to be so meaningless when the top 2 teams are playing for, like, what do you play? It's kind of like the Big Ten tournament championship in basketball, like when the 1 and 2 seeds make it all the way. Like, what are you playing for other than not getting hurt? I mean,
well, exactly.
You're playing for a trophy, yes, but given the college football playoff, like,
right,
that's a much bigger trophy and more important and more visible situation.
Well, and what we're going to see, I can guarantee it in the Big Ten is, you might have, let's say a regular season, you have 12-0 Ohio State, 10-2 Penn State, 10-2 Michigan, 10-2 Iowa, 9-3 Wisconsin, and you've got all these teams battling to get in the playoff. And then, but the 10-2 team that loses to Ohio State in the championship game, maybe it falls completely out of the playoff. You hurt yourself. In fact, I would say, certainly 2 years ago, the East-West divide actually helped the Big Ten East get 2 teams in the playoff. Because if they had to play one another, the chances are that they weren't, Ohio State wasn't going to go twice or whatever.
Yep.
So I could see that if the SEC and Big Ten, say they get, I would feel strongly thinking that each league gets 3 for sure, and maybe even 4. Mm-hmm. Then that means that maybe you just wipe out the championship weekend, and that's not the worst thing to do. I don't know. I mean, but there's a ripple effect. That's being one of them. But bowl games, on down, it'd be interesting to see how it plays out.
That's why I like 12, because you could play the conference title game and say, hey, the winner gets a first round bye in the college football playoff. Like, that's some stakes. That's some high stakes. Like,
right.
I don't know. Like, if you got pretty much have 4 power conferences left, right? Like, conference championship winner gets a bye. I don't know if they're thinking that way, but that seems like a good scenario for conference championships. But if you're at 14 or 16, then what does it mean? You got to play anyway, 10 days later or something,
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, you're already playing a major opponent because you're not going to play somebody who sucks.
Right. Yeah.
In Indianapolis or Atlanta or wherever.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Yeah. You're going to play the number 2 team or whatever, but you're going to play somebody who's probably in the playoff anyway. And as you said, if you've got somebody who's dinged up and you're already in the playoff, do you really risk it? I mean, the playoff is more important, and that's where we've come to in this scenario. So, the top 4 conference champions earn buys, and that's largely going to be the Power 4. But, Maybe there might be a 12-0 Mountain West team or Sun Belt team that kind of sneaks in there, and maybe a 9-3 ACC team. But I think overall it'll be the Power Four who gets those buys. But what I think is going to happen with 12 teams is they're going to let's say it's Ohio State's the number 1 seed, and then they see Michigan and Penn State both getting to host games in the tournament, and then they don't. They're going to go, what? We got to go play in New Orleans and then Phoenix and then Miami. 3 straight games. You're asking a lot of your fans.
Right. And that's kind of a whole different discussion that the bowl system shouldn't be driving this, that they should get a home game.
Right.
In my opinion. I mean, I'd rather see them play that quarterfinal at home than in Atlanta, Georgia, or wherever.
Well, yeah. And if there's a deterrent, if home field, cold weather, you want to move a game, say it's Michigan State and or Michigan, and they're like, I don't know if we want to play at home. And you want to play in Detroit, or Penn State wants to play at, in Pittsburgh, even if their field's not winterized. Okay, that's cool. Well, I'm all right with that. But I just think that you imagine, Iowa fans happen to struggle to pay 3 straight destination locations in that time of year. It's one thing to go to a bowl in Orlando for 3 days or a week or whatever. It's another thing to go, again, bouncing around the country, airfare, hotels, tickets are going to be expensive. I think you're asking a lot out of your fans. And then you want your fans to contribute to NIL and, and donate so you can keep your coaching staff. That's you're asking a ton out of fans. And that's not just unique to Iowa. That's everywhere.
Yeah. So you got the Hawkeyes winning 2 or 3 playoff games, huh? I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, they obviously don't do anything for the fans anymore.
Yeah. But
with this TV, it's all about TV.
Well, sure. Let's say it's a quarterfinal and Iowa's on the road. Would you rather go see the Grove at Ole Miss, or go see Tiger Stadium at night and LSU and Baton Rouge, or go see Alabama? Or would you rather go, we're going to go to Arlington and go to Jerry World? One's neutral. You got to get that, but the experience these places, or conversely, somebody coming to Kinnick Stadium from the South and it's cold, but then they also get to experience the wave. There's just so much here, and the rich tradition of college football is so much bigger than the bowls, and the bowls have owned it for so long. Anyway, I'm going on a rant.
Yeah, we are. Anyway, guess what? Spring football is like a month away, so we're going to talk a lot of football in the coming months here on Legends and Listeners, but we're thankful we had a chance, Scott, to spread our wings, I guess, and talk men's basketball. We really haven't talked much men's basketball this year, so it was fun to do that again and especially with you, because really it has been a long time since we've been able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, and they put themselves in that position to be talked about, because if they would have went 0-2, then we probably would have said, well, let's preview the women's game, and then we'll talk about men.
Exactly. All right. Well, thanks for listening. For Scott Dochterman, this is Chad Leistikow. Appreciate you being with us on Legends and Listeners from the Channel Seed Studios. We will talk to you next Thursday right here on the Iowa Everywhere Network.